Welcome to the Legal Advice in Paradise podcast, brought to you by www.legaladviceinparadise.com. Even in one of the most beautiful places in the world, life can be litigious. On this podcast, the best and brightest legal minds gather to help you navigate your way through every legal question you may face. This program will help you know your rights, know what steps to take, and help you find the best legal representation, all in simple, easy to understand terms. And now, here's your host, Justine Gronwald.
Aloha, and thank you for tuning in to our next podcast episode. Want to make sure you never miss an episode, as well as get tips on how to hire an attorney and be eligible for monthly prizes? It's easy. Just join our free membership called the Agent of Change membership. Text your name and your email to area code 808-670-3400. Make sure you text back agree. And also, to check out our past episodes, just log into www.legaladviceinparadisepodcast.com. Now enjoy the next episode. Aloha.
Reckless.
What about those guns? How do
The
they
laser guns.
Yeah, the laser guns. How do they use that in court, or do they?
They do, and the fight over the laser gun has been very particular here in Hawaii. I actually won a case at the Hawaii Supreme Court earlier this year that has set them on their heels. And the reason is because they've been using laser guns that, according to what is on the record from the government, they got these laser guns years ago, like in the 90s, along with the manuals in the 90s. And it's not clear from the officer's testimony through the last several years who taught them or how they got taught and whether or not they maintain the devices. So the defense bar has been attacking the training of the officers, whether or not they maintain or calibrate the devices as they're supposed to, because it's a device, it measures something. And so there have been several cases. My case was a big case. There were a case or two before mine that was a big case. And we thought there was going to be another big one that got decided this year, but it wasn't nearly as big when the decision came out. But it attacks the officers' training. For most people that don't get hit with criminal speeding, though, if they get hit with simple speeding, it boils down to the same thing, which is it's preponderance of the evidence. Do you want to fight it? Who are you going to hire for that? The case that I actually took up to the Hawaii Supreme Court and won was a civil case. He was not charged with excessive speeding. It was simple speeding. But that particular client had a top secret clearance, and he didn't want to have the moving violation. So we took it all the way up to the Hawaii Supreme Court, and the Hawaii Supreme Court that said that under the circumstances, what the officer testified to was insufficient to prove that they should be able to get the laser gun reading in. And then the case got dismissed after that because they couldn't go forward with it. So for people see those laser guns, and the courts recognize that a laser gun is not a horribly complicated concept. The idea is we know how fast a laser travels. It's light, and it should not be that difficult to measure how long it takes to get from point A to point B. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the device is infallible. The officer has to be trained the right way. He has to be able to articulate in court how he's trained. And if the prosecution can't get it out, or if the defense can cross-examine him and prove that he isn't actually as trained as he thought he was, or he wasn't using the device as he was supposed to, or the device wasn't calibrated like it was supposed to, then they don't get the reading in.
Well, it sounds like to me what you did in the Supreme Court set a precedence now for training the officers correctly.
Yes.
Has that happened?
Well, there's a couple parts to that. We have noticed in the defense bar that following my win at the Supreme Court, that officers have begun to testify slightly differently. Now, it seems to me that you then have to look at what the officer testified to in a prior case and then cross-examine compare with what he's saying now. Whether or not the police department is now doing something different with regard to the new academy recruits that are coming out to train them properly so that a couple years down the road everybody
doesn't happen to them.
There'll be other challenges, though. Trust me, we in the defense bar have looked to the future and we have other things prepared, but I'm not going to talk about
Yeah,
those.
yeah. Okay. Well, that's quite interesting. So when somebody gets caught for speeding, what would you like them to have prepared while sitting with you? Obviously, they're going to call you. You're going to say, come in for a consultation. Obviously, you're going to want to have them have the ticket and what they can remember. Is there anything else?
That's the important part. The
ticket, notes and time
the ticket
of
is
day.
very important, and they should bring that in, of course, if they have a copy of it and they don't lose it. But also what's very important is that you act quickly. And what I mean by that is even if you aren't going to go and take a tape recording of yourself and say exactly what happened at the time, remember that the officer is writing notes as it's happening on his copy of the ticket.
So it's fresh.
It's fresh in his mind. So if you don't do the same thing, if you don't pull over 5 minutes from then and write, oh, this is where I was, and take a picture of the sign and do everything, if you go about your business...
That's a good...
Sure.
That's some good tips. So you know what came to mind is most people have smartphones with voice memos. Right. So I would, this is just me now. This is all happening right now. I would think that you take your phone out, start voice memoing the time, the place, and also take photos if that applies.
Right. Take photos.
And then you just.
And you're try to get as much information because you realize that the officer is trying to get information as well. He's looking for incriminating statements.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's his job.
Yeah, and we all know that gambling moment that we take when the officer has pulled us over.
Oh,
okay?
Yeah.
When the officer pulls us over and he asks, "Do you know why I pulled you over?"
Yes.
At that point, it is time to roll the dice. Okay, it is time to roll the dice. Well, I'll tell you, I got pulled over in Arizona. I came up over the crest of a hill. I was in a rush trying to get to my job. As soon as I came over the crest of the hill,
there he was.
I saw him straight ahead at me because that road came to a T, and he was sitting right at the T. And he was looking right at me. And so I powered down, I slowed down, and I didn't even wait for him to pull me over. As soon as I made the left, I pulled right over.
Yeah, pull right over.
And I tried the absolute honest approach. He said, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" And I said, "Yes, I sure do." And I was going too fast, and I admitted everything, and he let me off, and he didn't give me a ticket.
Wow.
Because he realized that I was dejected, I was caught, I fessed up. But that depends upon the officer.
Right.
Some officers will take everything that you just said, and they'll write it down. He told me he knew he was going too fast.
Oh, admitting.
He confessed, and they admit it, and they write it down. Now you're sunk. So if you roll the dice in that circumstance, you've just sealed your fate.
Okay.
Some people will try something else, which is, "Do you know why I pulled you over? How can I help you, officer?" Or they invoke their right to remain silent. Some people like to do that.
Really?
They don't say anything. They say, "Well, here's my driver's license." Now, at that point...
And your insurance and all your stuff.
Right, and you give them everything.
And everything.
At that point, it depends upon the officer. He may decide, well, I'm not going to not give you a ticket. I'm going to give you a ticket, but here's just your ticket. You don't want to talk to me? Fine. Here's your ticket. Have a nice day. He could do that. Or he may decide, well, I was going to give you a break, but now since you're doing that, here's your ticket, and that's again rolling the dice.
Right.
And they do interpret it as an attitude, even if you are polite.
No kidding.
Well, some of them may. Some of them
Okay.
may. Some of them don't. They say, "Okay, fine, you don't want to talk to me. Here's your ticket." Because they might have been willing to give you a ticket anyway. But there's no problem with talking to the officer. So if he lasers you, and you can say, "Well, can I see the laser gun?" Some of them won't show you. There's no obligation. They don't have to show you.
That never came to my mind to ask for a
some
laser
people will
gun.
ask.
Well,
Some people will ask.
That's unusual.
And what's important is if he shows it to you, if you're calm enough to see and be able to read the gun, is not only your alleged speed, which is on the gun, but the distance at which he says he got you. Okay? Because if you're pulled over, figure you pulled over within whatever period of time.
Right. It takes time.
Right. Then you have to figure out, well, where was he? Or if you remember where he was, if you spotted him. Some people just get pulled over and I have no idea where he came from.
Right.
But if you spotted him, then what you have to do, some people are very detailed about this because now you're your own investigator. Okay, and talking about taking pictures, if you go back and you take pictures and you say, "There's no way he spotted me because he was behind a bush or he was around a corner," and you're thinking maybe he got the car next to you, all that adds. That's important. And again, if you don't remember the exact spot, at least get to the lawyer early so that if I ask you all these questions, maybe we can Google Earth it, or you and I can go down there, or I could ask you to go and then you could take pictures later. Sure. Well, I mean, if somebody gets pulled over in the pineapple fields over by Wahiwa, right up there,
right.
I really don't want to drive over there just so I can see the exact layout. If you could tell me, and it may be that they may not be able to specify exactly where the officer was by reference, because they don't know where the mile marker is. There's nothing but a field, right? There's no, he wasn't sitting by the house.
Right.
So there's no way for me to discern it. But yeah, take whatever notes. Now this is more important the more serious the offense.
Of course. Yeah.
For simple speeding, most people won't do it.
Yeah.
And they'll, or you could take pictures with your smartphone. You could do a little voice recording. I don't know where he came from. There were 20 cars out. I was in the left-hand lane. Whatever you want, whatever you think is important, because that's what I'll do. Is especially for DUIs or for more serious crimes, I will tape record the interview. So if you want to do it when it's fresh in your mind, he just left your car. That works too.
Just start talking.
Yeah.
And then also, I hear this a lot. Well, I got pulled over and I was just going with the flow of the traffic. Why did he pinpoint me? Is that?
Because he can.
Because he can.
There was a cartoon I saw a long time ago at a police station. I was a reserve police officer before I became a lawyer at some point. And it had an officer standing in the middle of the highway, stopping every single car and directing them all to the side of the road, because
he could.
Well, because he could, because chances are there's a lot of cases, not so much here in Hawaii. Here in Hawaii, people do tend to travel a lot slower, but especially on the mainland, you could look over any section of highway and every single person is over the speed limit. Every single person. And the officer just picks the one that he either wants to pull over or seems to be going faster than the others. But I was going with the flow of traffic.
Yeah, I've heard that so many times throughout my life. Oh, man, this guy just picks me out. I was just going with the flow of the traffic.
But
everybody else was going the same speed. Why did he pick me out?
Well, then it's just random. But if everybody's speeding, then you were just the unlucky one. Going with the flow is not really... Well, I shouldn't say that. Here in Hawaii, it has not yet become a defense. And what I mean by that is in Arizona, there was the speeding statute basically wasn't just a flat rate. The posted speed limit says X. It said so that it's reasonable and safe under the circumstances.
Oh, okay.
And there was a guy, I don't remember if it ever became precedent, but there was a guy who proved that although he was going over the posted speed limit, he was reasonable under the circumstances, in part because everybody was going at least a few miles an hour over the speed limit. And some judge said, "You're right."
Wow.
And but that's
isolated.
That's isolated.
Yeah.
And it hasn't come to pass here
Yeah,
that I'm aware of.
You don't want to gamble with that.
Well, you can try it. I mean, if you're going to fight, you might as well try it. But I don't think it's necessarily a winner of a defense. I mean, you shouldn't throw your hat on it and say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to win," just because you try that argument. Everybody was going as fast as I was.
Yeah, I think this relates to a lot of people. I mean, we're all driving cars in Hawaii. We love our cars, so I think this will be helpful for a lot of people. Is there anything else you think the public should know?
Well,
aside from being prepared when coming to you.
Sure. A lot of people don't know or are afraid to exercise their rights. And for example, in DUI cases, when people are pulled over, well, first of all, I think as Americans, we're all sort of conflicted. We both love our government and we hate our government, right? I mean, we all, everybody loves their police officer until their police officer is pulling them over. Then they say, "Oh, it's just arbitrary and discretionary. He was picking on me." And so there is that conflict that we have, that when the officer comes up, the question is, how exactly do we approach this? And some people will try I'm going to be cooperative. And cooperative can be helpful in some respects, but from a criminal defense attorney's perspective, you're being cooperative means you're giving him evidence to use against you, and that's a bad thing. And so I think what a lot of people really want to be is not cooperative, they want to be polite.
Polite? Okay.
Polite is different from cooperative.
Okay.
Because if the officer says, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" You see, there's even, from a defense attorney's perspective, there's no correct answer to that.
Okay.
There isn't.
Yeah.
Okay? Because if the officer writes in his report that he was behind you, 3 car lengths away, and he was pacing you, and you were doing 65 and a 55, you were speeding, right? So he says, I'm back there in my marked patrol car, and she's speeding in front of me as I follow her for half a mile. And then he asks you, do you know why I pulled you over? If you say no,
Oh boy.
he's going to say, she must not have known what was going on,
Yeah.
right? If you say yes, then I had a reason to pull you over. What was that reason? And, I was speeding. Okay, that's a confession.
Right.
So there is no good answer. But you can be polite. Here's my driver's license, officer.
Okay.
Now, he's still going to try and twist that against you. She ignored my question. Okay. And he says, well, do you know why I pulled you over? He asks it again. And you can say, well, is there something else you need, officer? See, this is what I call engaging in verbal judo.
Wow.
If you give him your documents, and
Yeah.
you say, well, there's my license
You're
registration.
cooperating.
You're cooperating, right? You gave him, you stopped as you were supposed to, and you gave him your documents. Now, the problem here is that a lot of officers are going to interpret this as attitude. Okay. But to me, if it's a criminal offense, there's DUI, excessive speeding, or something like that, the chances are he's probably going to look for an arrest anyway. A moving violation, if you say, oh, gee, yeah, mea culpa, I was speeding, I'm sorry, there's a chance. It's just another moving violation. Maybe he says, okay, fine, you need to slow down, have a nice day. But when it comes to an alleged crime, you're doing 85. Hey, that's a crime. If he smells alcohol, hey, you're maybe DUI. So he's less likely to just say, oh, well, have a nice night, stay safe. Okay, even if you're cooperative. So at this point, if you say, well, here's my driver's license. How can I help you? Well, do you know why I pulled you over? Is there something else I can help you with, officer? Right? So you're telling him, I'm not answering your question. Right? Now, some people, they want to throw on the American flag. They say, I'm not answering your question. You can tell them that
American
too.
flag.
You can do that. You say that to the officer. And then, now he's going to ask you other things. Say, for example, in a DUI, he says, well, I smell alcohol. Have you been drinking? Again, there's no good answer to this, right? If you say yes, you just admitted to drinking. Not that drinking and driving is illegal. It isn't. You have to drink and be impaired, or you have to drink and have your breath or blood alcohol concentration over a certain limit, which a lot of people are not very good at calculating, whether or not they're going to approach that limit or be over it. And so, again, there's no good answer. And if you say no, he says, well, in his report that he's going to write, I smelled alcohol, she denied, so she's lying to me. Right? That's what he's going to say.
Oh.
So, again, there's no good answer. Even if you ignore his question, he's going to say, well, she ignored my question. Of course, ignoring the question is fine. You don't have to answer his question. Field sobriety tests.
Is this where you're saying to exercise your rights?
Yes.
Because you are not obligated to answer.
No.
I see.
Now, there are certain things you're obligated to do. If he says, where's your driver's license?
Right,
And he
yeah,
pulled
of
you over
course.
and you're driving.
Yeah, of course.
Some people you'll look out on the internet and you'll see people who are like, well, this is a free country and I don't have to have my papers. And yeah, okay, all right. But that's not going to work in court. If the officer pulls you over and he wants your driver's license, at least hand him your driver's license. This, I'm not handing over my papers, is probably just going to escalate things in an unnecessary way.
Yeah.
But if you give him your license and you say, am I free to leave? And he doesn't say yes, then you're stuck there, right? But you keep asking to leave. Now, sooner or later...
I never thought about that. Am I free to leave? I mean, that would never have crossed my... I think because a lot of people are
scared.
Intimidated, scared, especially if this is not the norm for them.
Right.
I think that fits majority of the people. They wouldn't think to say, am I free to go? They're just sitting there scared and, all that stuff.
But things escalate very, very quickly in a criminal case. Okay, if it's a simple moving violation, he goes back to his car, he comes back with a ticket, here you go, and you say, oh, well, gee, he's writing me a ticket. But then you move on, it's a ticket.
Right.
But if he asks you to step out of the car, doesn't need to give you a moving violation with you stepping out of the car. Things are now going in a bad way if he's asking you to step out of the car. And at this point, there's a question of whether or not you have to step out of the car. You don't have to do the walking test or any of those other tests.
You don't?
No, you don't. And a lot of people will because I've heard different things from different people. They say, well, the videotape will show that I did them just fine. Except HPD doesn't use video cameras.
Oh.
So the officer is going to write up the report and he's going to say, no, you failed.
It's his interpretation.
And it's very subjective. It is completely subjective, as a matter of fact. So if there are witnesses in your car, your friends, I need those names. And, it's sad, but the best cases I have witnesses on board. Okay, which is not to say that everybody should drive around with 3 of their best friends who are going to be witnesses everywhere they go. But in those circumstances, it is beneficial to have somebody who might be able to testify. I saw what happened. I didn't think he was speeding. I saw the test. I think he did fine. That sort of thing can be quite helpful.
Oh.
But a lot of people don't exercise their rights with regard to just refusing to help the officer.
Huh. It wouldn't have crossed my mind.
Yeah, well, and most people want to cooperate because first they think that the officer is under no obligation to tell you that you can refuse.
Oh.
The field sobriety test I'm talking about, so the walking part, the walking on the street.
Huh.
So he said, and a lot of times the officers will phrase things very carefully, okay? And if you want to think about it, the police are junior lawyers. They're very good at phrasing things in a particular way to get what they want.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, because they'll say things like, can you step out of the car? Now, that sounds like a question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And if you think about it, can you step out of the car? All right, if you want to be real, yes, I am capable of stepping out of the car. Well, of course, that's not what the officer means.
He wants you to move.
He wants you to step, right?
Yeah.
He wants you to step out of the car. But then the question is, well, does he want you to move because he's requesting you to or because he's commanding you to?
I would think commanding.
That's what a lot of people think.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's important, though, because in the report and in his testimony, he's going to say, I asked her to get out of the car. And it makes it sound as though he said, would you please exit the car for me? And then if you're consenting to exiting, then you exited voluntarily. See, so there's a very important, and you're going to be very stressed.
Yes.
You're not going to be thinking about this.
No.
You're going to be concentrating on every word that he says. And of course, you don't want to be in a position to unnecessarily escalate things, and you don't want to be in a position where he orders you to do something and you refuse the order. So you have to be very attentive to what he's asking and very circumspect about how you answer his questions. So when he says, would you step out of the car? Are you telling me to get out of the car? And the officers, they don't like clarification in that circumstance.
Yeah, I would think
they don't like clarification.
Yeah.
He's going to repeat it. Would you step out of the car? Okay, and this is where, and again, a lot of people, this takes a lot of chutzpah and presence of mind to go through this. Because when an officer says, would you step out of the car, most people don't think, well, are you telling me or are you asking
people
me?
Just
they step out of the car.
They unbuckle and they get out of the
And
car. And then they're like, oh no, what's going to happen to me next?
And if you step out of the car, then the next phrase is he might say, I'm going to have you do some sobriety checks. I want to make sure you're okay. All right, this is something that I tell my clients. If you call the police, somebody broke into my car, somebody broke into my house, somebody damaged my property, I'm calling 911, I want you to come to my house. Talk to the police, okay, because you called them. If they are coming to you, you probably don't want to talk to them. That's just a good criminal defense attorney's flat answer. I'd like you to do things for me. Yeah, but I didn't call you. So if you want me to do things for you, that's probably because you're looking at me for a crime. So I would prefer to not do those things. So, if he says, well, I want to make sure you're okay to drive. I want you to do these field sobriety tests. No, I don't want to walk and turn.
I had no idea
you
could refuse.
Sure you can. Now, I will also tell people that he has handcuffs. He has a radio. He has a gun. He has a baton, and he has the authority to arrest you. So if you say, I'm not telling you about whether or not I'd had anything to drink, I'm not telling you about whether or not I feel okay, I'm not doing any of your field sobriety tests here out on the street, that doesn't mean that he can't turn you around and put handcuffs on you.
Wow.
Okay? Just because I say, yeah, go ahead and don't walk and turn for him, don't do the walking a straight line test for him, that doesn't stop him from saying, turn around, you're under arrest. He can still do it, and they've done it. I've had clients who have refused the field sobriety test, that is, they won't walk and turn, and they still get arrested. However, it makes my case a lot better.
Oh, I see.
But don't think, well, Mr. O'Grady said I don't have to do the walk and turn. Therefore, you should be gone. Be off with you, Mr. Officer. I prefer not to do this test, so leave me alone. That doesn't mean he's going to say, oh, sorry, sir, please have a nice night. Continue driving.
Yeah.
He may very well still arrest you.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's not to say that there isn't a case where he even needs those. There's a reason why they do field sobriety tests. But in some circumstances, they don't have to. And what we can imagine from this is those cases that we see on TV. The ones that they put on the cop shows.
Right.
Where the person gets out of the car and they're falling all over themselves.
They're pretty traumatic,
Right.
Yeah.
In that circumstance, the walking a straight line is just icing on the cake. It doesn't. They could arrest him without it anyway.
Right.
So, but again, for DUI is one of those crimes that capture a lot of regular folks. I don't know anybody, whoever comes in and signs up with me next week, this week they aren't saying, hey, you know what, this Friday night I'm going to go out and get drunk and get arrested.
Exactly.
That's different from somebody who wants to go and get into a fight, wants to go buy drugs, is engaged in some sort of conspiracy to defraud somebody. They're thinking about it at least a little bit ahead of schedule. DUIs captures a lot of regular folks.
Yeah, regular folks. And the statistics I heard from my other interview was that there's like 7,000 arrests average now in Hawaii alone.
I would think there's
7,
more than that. I would think
Has it
there's more.
escalated again? Because at one point it was 8,000. It's gone down a little.
I can't say for sure, but if I just look at the case numbers for this particular island, I think we're probably almost at that for this island. Now, granted, the other counties have smaller populations, so they aren't contributing as much.
Right.
But
majority of it's here.
yes, because of the majority of the population as well.
Yeah. So I can see where the speeding and the alcohol, go hand in hand. Or the well, not really.
Actually,
but
no.
The weaving, impairing.
Alleged weaving is something that typically the officers will say they spot, but nobody is perfect when they drive. There are a variety of other things that, whether it be cell phones or whether it be makeup or radio or something else like that, that cause people to weave. Then, of course, there's the things, again, that we see on the TV shows where the person's crossing 2 and 3 lanes all over the place. That's different.
Yeah,
that's different.
That's really endangering people. But I think we covered the spectrum of the traffic crimes. Oh, there's one more thing I wanted to ask you, and this is just because one of my listeners asked me. Sometimes listeners will call and ask questions. This is like, so she was in a very slow, area, 25 miles per hour, and she pulled on the side and she pulled behind an officer.
Okay.
And she didn't want to get distracted. She just wanted to pull on the side. She's a real estate agent. She just needed to think. The officer came out of her car and said, what are you doing here? And I'm guessing it's not a parking zone. It's behind a stop sign and a four-way. And the officer gave her a ticket.
Well, assuming that wherever she parked or stopped, it was not appropriate and it was against the code to do so.
And she was thinking, because this officer parked on the side, she just parked behind the officer, it was okay.
Well, first of all, as we all know, officers, especially when they're on duty, can violate traffic codes. They can speed without necessarily having their lights and siren on. I leave it to a civil attorney that does torts to discuss whether or not, if an officer without his lights and siren on were to get into an accident, whether or not there'd be liability because he didn't have his lights and siren on. That's not my area.
Okay.
But we've all seen the officer who doesn't have his siren on and who doesn't have his flashing lights on, and he's going faster than the speed limit. We all see them park in a spot where you can't park.
Yeah, so, she parked behind, and then she got a ticket.
That doesn't mean that you can. Why that officer did that, you'd have to ask the officer. Officers, though, are taught about officer safety, and they can be twitchy when people come up behind them because they don't know if perhaps you're some person or a relative of some person that they arrested a year ago, and you're trying to do something to them.
I never thought about that.
Well, they have to protect themselves. They are very conscious of that. They are also taught to basically stay in control of the situation. So they pull up behind you. They shine their bright lights at you to distract you so that you can't see, so that they are in control of the situation so they can be safe. If you roll up behind them and you stop, they start getting suspicious.
In an unusual area.
Right. Well, especially if you don't get out of your car and say, officer, my car broke down, or there's somebody back there with a flat tire. If you're not getting their attention, if you just sit back there, that will cause most officers to get a little bit apprehensive.
Well, I guess that would, But
at least that's what they're trained.
That wasn't her intent. But she
oh, no, I know.
She wrote to me. She's a realtor. She's always on the road, and she didn't want to use her cell phone on the road, so she pulled behind this officer.
I think it was unnecessary for the officer having found out.
It was a woman officer, too.
Well, I don't know, but I don't know why she felt it was necessary to give her a ticket. It may have been technically proper. Perhaps she was parked in an illegal space, but It's up to the officer. They have the discretion.
Well, I just thought I'd throw that in there since I had you here. But
Right.
that was a lot of information. We went a while. We might just, put this in half.
Okay.
So, but I thank you so much for that. And we're going to come back on another episode to cover
More soldiers,
soldiers,
sailors, service members.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll see you again in the next episode. For now, we usually shaka out.
All right.
And then we say aloha and a hui ho.
Aloha and a hui ho.
Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Legal Advice in Paradise podcast. For more information, visit www.legaladviceinparadise.com.